thunder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atom boys, give her the gun.
And I'm here to take you on a journey. It's a journey back even to 1924. And a little bit about World War II, and a little bit about an airplane, and a little bit about my mom and dad. I've written a novel that's based on my dad's life. It's called American Headhunter. And you probably wonder, American Headhunter, what does that mean? Well, my dad certainly was an American, but he wasn't the typical definition of a headhunter, which would be a cannibal or that kind of ritual or religion. But it was his call sign for the 80th Fighter Squadron, who were called the Headhunters. So I want to take you on this journey this morning and tell you a little bit about this story. Now, I shouldn't be here. And the reason that I shouldn't be here is that my father wasn't wanted by his own father. And in fact, when I was a small boy, I overheard my grandmother talking to my mother saying that she tried various methods to induce an abortion with my father, because she was told by her husband, my grandfather, get rid of it. Get rid of that child. You can't take care of a child. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to be here, because obviously those methods did not work. But there's also another reason. My father was a pilot in World War II and flew many missions in the South Pacific. And on December 26, 1944, he should have been killed, but he wasn't. But a famous airplane called the P-38 Lightning saved his life, as well as a parachute that you will see later. We're here at a very, very special spot for a number of reasons. First of all, this is where the book American Headhunter begins. At this very, very spot where I meet a person and I tell them this story. It's also a special spot, obviously, because these are my parents that are interred behind this marble plaque right here. I am a junior, the namesake of my father. And this book is not just about a boy becoming a man and fighting in World War II as a pilot, but it's also a love story between these two people, Kenneth and Evelyn. They met miraculously on a blind date, New Year's Eve, 1943. And they were inseparable thereafter, except for the 2.5 years that my dad spent overseas. Now, my mother told me later that they wrote to each other every day that my dad was gone. And I figured up mathematically that must have been close to 1,300 letters that they wrote. And so, you've got not only a boy becoming a man, but also a love story of two people. Now, there is also another love story, and that's the love story of an airplane that my father had for the famous P-38 Lightning. When he was a boy working the orange fields in Santa Ana, California, these planes would fly overhead, and he told one of his close friends, one day I'm going to fly one of those planes. But in order to tell that story more appropriately, we need to go across the street to a special hangar, a P-38 hangar at the March Air Force Reserve Base Museum. So the next time we see each other, we're going to be at that museum. So come join me.
Over there, send the word, over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums coming everywhere. So prepare.
Welcome back. I'm glad that you're still viewing the video. But there's also another story about this plane itself. And I would like to go into a little bit of the history about that. But I want to introduce to you first a very special friend of mine, Art Newman, who's the P-38 National President. Welcome, Art. Thanks that we can use this hangar, which is at the March Air Force Reserve Base. And I just don't think there's anything like this anywhere in the country, is there, Art?
No. This is a fantastic reproduction.
Yeah.
It's a very innovative plane for its time and very distinctive and iconic airplane.
Sure. Well, you know, one of the things that bothered me during my research on this book is that here it is, Lockheed Aircraft Corporation wins the bid that the U.S. Army sent out to most of the aircraft manufacturers to come up with an airplane that could outfly the German Messerschmitt 109 and the Japanese Zero. And there was huge hype about this plane.
Oh, massive.
Yeah, I mean, the newspaper articles were again and again, when is it going to come out? When is it going to come out? They finally get a prototype in 1939, and everyone felt that this plane was going to rule the skies. And we knew that eventually we'd probably have to get into the war. And General Jimmy Doolittle was heading up the air forces in the European theater even before we got into it. And of course the P-38 was in hot demand. Then the roof caved in, didn't it? And what the Nazis called the airplane the fork-tailed devil. And they were afraid of the airplane. But it didn't take them long to realize that in a steep dive, the controls would lock up and a number of pilots were being killed. And the Lockheed engineers just went frantic trying to figure out what caused this particular problem that they referred to as compressibility. And so numerous things were attempted to try to change that. But what ended up happening is that the P-38 lost its luster and didn't regain it until years later in the Pacific Theater when the problem of compressibility got solved. That brings you kind of to the history of it, but in the South Pacific, the victory ratio went from 12 to 1, and the pilots loved the airplane, and it was born to fly in the tropics. It did great in the tropics. The other thing that bothered me in the history of this plane is I don't think Hollywood took the opportunity to tell this story of how the engineering took place, that it was the first plane to come out of the Skunk Works, and Clarence Kelly Johnson was the head of that, and all the machinations and the ulcer that he had, a bleeding ulcer in his stomach, over trying to solve these problems that all aircraft go through in their development. And so there was one picture that was shown called A Guy Named Joe with Spencer Tracy, Irene Dunn, and Van Johnson, in which the airplane was highlighted to some degree. But I don't believe the story was actually told adequately about how the whole plane developed and how it went from up here to the greatest thing since sliced bread to way down here, and then back up again. And I don't think that story was adequately told. And you have tried to tell this story here with this beautiful museum. And so I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to be a docent and be a part of what you've put together. Is there anything else you want to say, Art?
Well, I haven't said much yet.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Obviously, your book is fantastic. I've read it. It's a fantastic read. It does show the development of a relationship between you and your father, your mother and your father, and his exploits in the Pacific Theater in World War II. It's a fantastic read. And I thank you very much. We are honored to have such a historian and author as a docent in the P-38 National Association. It's our pleasure. Someone with your knowledge is few and far between in this world.
Oh, great.
And it looks like you brought a lot of artifacts. These from your father.
Yeah, that's true. Would you like me to kind of
This looks like a real deal parachute here.
Yeah, that's the actual parachute that saved his life. There were a lot of silkworms and moths that were involved in the making of this.
I can imagine that's
But it saved his life. And this was the actual plane that night that he was after it hit the water, he was able to bring it up to 2,500 feet and bail out and save his life. And obviously that's why I'm still here. And for that particular night raid, he got the Distinguished Flying Cross as a result of being involved in that suicide mission at night. As I mentioned before, P-38 wasn't very good at it. And the way he described it is they were going after the planes down, I mean the ships down on the water. All you could see is tracer bullets, like a swarm of bees coming at him. He didn't know what he was shooting at. And so he came around, the moon came out, he comes over the water, and he hits the water.
My gosh.
And they told him in flight school, if you hit the water, it's over.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because of the trailing empennage would hit the water, you're not going to be able to get it to fly.
Yeah, just disintegrate.
This jacket, that's the Headhunter patch, the 80th Fighter Squadron, that's his cap. I still have these things today. And over here, his crew chief made a hula skirt for my mom, and
did she ever wear it?
she never wore it. I think she felt that it was a little too much for that era. But they kept it, and obviously for the family it's been quite
an affection towards World War II history or that era, the 40s. You all have, I know I do, I have a lot of memorabilia.
Sure.
Similar to this, but nothing like this parachute. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, and that's why I just had to write the book.
Yeah,
And they can get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any of the major bookstores. They can order it. And in addition, I really hope that people who see this video, if they're in the Southern California area, that they come right here and see what you have done. Because we cannot, you know, there's the old adage, those that don't pay attention to history will end up being doomed to repeat it. And so the last thing I want to say is God bless you for watching this video, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you, Art.
You're welcome.
Can I touch you without a mask?